Good evening, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. It's been a historic day in Alberta as Pope Francis formally apologized to residential school survivors and their families on Canadian soil for what he called a deplorable evil. APTN's Tina House joins us from the Musqueam First Nation with reaction to what unfolded today.
It's been an incredible day full of emotion and a lot of heartfelt tribute given to residential school survivors here at the Musqueam First Nation. Not too long ago, Pope Francis concluded his presentation here where he officially apologized to residential school survivors and their families. What's surprising, though, is there wasn't as big of a turnout as expected. In fact, many of the seats here sat empty. Maybe it was the fact that it was tight security here, we're not quite sure, or there is a genuine distaste for the Pope coming to visit here at Musqueam. But those that were in attendance did hear his heartfelt words when he said that he begged for forgiveness for all that was done to residential school survivors and indeed their families.
Estoy dolido. Pido perdón en particular.
I am sorry. I ask forgiveness in particular for the ways in which many members of the Church and of religious communities cooperated, not least through their indifference, in projects of cultural destruction and forced assimilation promoted by the governments of that time, which culminated in the system of residential schools.
We heard from leaders. I think what was the most touching part here today was seeing the grand entry with the chiefs and the dancers and the Eagle staff. And in fact, Pope Francis was offered a bonnet by Grand Chief Willie Littlechild. And that was a very interesting moment because we never expected to see that ever happen. So next stop today is the Sacred Heart Church in Edmonton, where the Pope is expected to address parishioners and more survivors in the city. Tomorrow morning is the Commonwealth Stadium, where he's expected to give a Mass, and then Lake St. Anne tomorrow evening. And we'll be there every step of the way, providing you more stories. Back to you in studio.
Thanks for that, Tina. The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. And thousands of Indigenous people have been traveling in the last few days ahead of this historic day with the papal visit. Our neighbors to the south are no exception. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs sat in on a roundtable prayer with survivors of Indian boarding schools in the United States. They gathered on Sunday in Musqueam in solidarity. Here's that story.
Lord God, we pray that the fields are ready.
Tribal leaders from the United States are doing what they can to ensure the papal visit is done in a good way. That's why they're in Wetaskiwin, showing solidarity for their northern relations, meeting and praying for respected leaders from Musqueam.
The Native American leadership is indeed watching Canada very closely, and in fact has partnered with Canada very closely. Upon learning that the Pope was coming to Canada, we hosted Zoom calls with Canadian and Native American leadership. And we call it that. But Native America doesn't have a border, you're correct. And this is why we got involved.
Kara Curry Hall is an intergenerational survivor from Musqueam who has traveled from North Dakota to watch an apology from Pope Francis take place where her family attended residential school in Ermineskin Cree Nation, Alberta. She says Indigenous survivors in the U.S. are also on a healing journey and require penitence for Indian boarding schools.
Same thing happened in the United States that happened in Canada. They also have, following that report and investigation, legislative pieces that are in place. They're House bills and Senate bills. It's the same bill with different numbers. And it is to establish a Truth and Healing Commission, like what we did in Canada called the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And the discussions are going on now. They had the hearings and it crossed over to the Senate side now. And we're doing our job, lobby the Senate, lobby the entire party. You know, the Republican Party likes to say, we want to work in bipartisan. I said, so then do it. And we're telling them, you need to support this legislative piece. But here's why you need to support the legislative piece, outside of it's the right thing to do, and you need to do it, is that the Pope apologized. The Pope already apologized for that. Why would you not support the legislative piece?
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Wetaskiwin, Treaty 6 territory.
Now to Quebec, with thousands, even possibly tens of thousands of people flocking to Quebec City for the second leg of the papal visit to Canada. The Cree community of Chisapi says after much consideration, they'll be sitting this visit out. Back in June, Chisapi became the first community in Quebec to announce they'd be initiating ground searches on Fort George Island, where the Anglican and Catholic churches both operated residential schools. In a press release, Chisapi Chief Daisy House said the community will focus on healing and traditional activities locally and will not, in the end, send an official delegation to meet with Pope Francis. And as the Pope apologizes on Canadian soil, it is the previous Vatican audience in the spring that some Inuit survivors are remembering today. They asked the Catholic Church to intervene in the case of Johann Revoir, an Oblate priest living in France and evading Canadian justice. Kathleen Martins and Brittany Guillot have a North American exclusive sit-down interview with Revoir from Lyon, France. Please be aware some of this content may be triggering for some viewers.
A long-awaited apology was delivered by Pope Francis earlier this year for the Catholic Church's role in the residential school system.
For the deplorable conduct of these members of the Catholic Church,
e vorrei dirvi di tutto cuore, sono molto addolorato.
I ask for God's forgiveness, and I want to say to you with all my heart, I am very sorry.
At that meeting, Inuit delegates asked the Pope to intervene in the case of Johann Revoir, an Oblate priest accused of sexually assaulting children in Nunavut. He has never spoken to North American media, but agreed to sit down with APTN National News. When we arrived to his retirement home in Lyon, France, the now retired priest refused to go on camera, but allowed us to record him.
Un jour, mon curé m'a posé la question, ça ne t'intéresserait pas de devenir prêtre? Il était chez les Oblats, et il était dans le Grand Nord. Alors il nous racontait là-bas. C'est ce qui m'a intéressé. Et pour aller là-haut, il fallait que je rentre chez les Oblats.
He says he spent time in Ontario learning English before arriving in Chesterfield Inlet in 1960.
L'esquimau, pour un Français, c'est très facile à prononcer. Alors j'ai appris à dire la messe. Je comprenais rien de ce que je disais, mais eux comprenaient tout. Il y avait 2 maisons, le poste de fourrure et la mission. C'est un lieu de passage des gens. Alors quand ils venaient vendre la fourrure, ils venaient visiter la mission. On buvait une tasse de café ensemble. Ils faisaient leur petite prière à la chapelle.
Revoir says life in the far north was easygoing, but in 1993 he suddenly packed his bags and returned to France. After 3 miners say he sexually abused them in the late 1960s. After 2 decades, the charges were stayed due to a lack of reasonable prospect of conviction, and Revoir claims he doesn't know much about the allegations.
Est-ce que vous avez des faits précis? Moi, j'ai 2 faits précis qu'on m'a donnés. Il y a celui-là qui s'est suicidé, il y a une autre maman qui est, je ne sais pas quel âge elle a. Elle racontait à ses copines, quand à 6 ans, que je me masturbais devant elle et je la caressais. Et puis je vais avoir une 3e main avec la photo du diable. En lui disant, si tu en parles, il va venir t'emmener en enfer. C'est ce que j'ai entendu.
Revoir denies all of the allegations against him.
J'ai passé 30 ans, plus de 30 ans là-bas, à aider les gens comme je pouvais. Puis on ne parle de rien d'autre que je fais là-bas, sauf ça. J'ai touché des pénis, j'ai touché mais c'était en tant qu'infirmier, infirmier bénévole. J'étais le seul. Au début, là, avant qu'il y ait la Greenland, la ligne, il n'y avait rien. Alors le gouvernement nous donnait chaque année une petite valise d'affaires très simples, de l'aspirine, un peu d'affaires pour faire des bandages. Il y avait Et quand quelqu'un avait un problème, ben, il venait nous voir comme infirmier. Alors il avait mal à leur pénis ou tout ça, ben, il venait me voir. J'ai même regardé des filles aussi. Il y avait une épidémie de syphilis là-haut à ce moment-là. Ben, alors, puis je communiquais avec un docteur qui était à 100 km au sud.
He says he did not abuse children while up north.
Si les gens ne veulent pas me croire, il n'y peut rien. Moi, je n'ai pas conscience d'avoir fait quelque chose de grave.
Brittany Guillot, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
All right, you can watch part 2 of their interview tomorrow on APTN National News. And we need to step aside for a short break. When we return, a group of residential school survivors long battled to obtain records could be headed to the Supreme Court. Welcome back. A group of residential school survivors long battled to obtain records could be headed to the Supreme Court. Survivors of the former St. Anne's Residential School in northeastern Ontario have applied to the country's highest court to have their case heard. This comes after multiple failed attempts to obtain school records from the federal government. APTN's Fraser Needham reports.
And I hang it up over my desk because it speaks to me.
That's Evelyn Korkmaz talking about her lost childhood at the notorious St. Anne's Residential School. Korkmaz attended there from 1969 to 1972. And she wants to regain a part of that history by reading files that are currently denied to her.
The Department of Justice said in, a news conference that the reason why they're denying us is because we want to see all the IAP claimants' files. That's not true. I don't want to see someone else's file. That's personal. That's their story. I want to see my own because there's a lot that you don't remember. That, you black out when, you go through trauma.
NDP MP Charlie Angus has repeatedly accused the government of suppressing the release of these documents. He says the government has left them no choice but to take their case to Canada's top court.
How do you have a credible legal process where the defendant, Canada, is allowed to suppress evidence? That has never been addressed by the federal government. There's been multiple court cases, multiple battles, multiple efforts to get various ministers to sit down and negotiate a solution, and the government has stonewalled.
The Trudeau government signed an MOU with the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation earlier this year to provide more residential school records. But at the time, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller said legalities make this a complicated process. Angus says this should not be the case with St. Anne's records.
But in the case of St. Anne's, these are a very specific set of documents that the Government of Canada has had in their possession. They are the police interviews with witnesses. It's the police evidence of the crimes of notorious pedophile predators like Father Arthur Lavoie.
For her part, Korkmaz says St. Anne's survivors just want the government to do the right thing.
All we want is justice for, the lost childhood that we had. We had to grow up fast. We lost our innocence. We were put into these institutions, told that they would take good care of us, and we came out, hurt, damaged, and just left there to, put ourselves back together.
In an emailed statement to APTN, Miller's office says it has complied with all court orders regarding independent assessment process documents for St. Anne's. And the courts have found Canada has met its disclosure obligations. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Now to Saskatchewan. The Moosomin First Nation in Saskatchewan is off to the races. They're the first in Canada to secure a gaming license to be a track operator for thoroughbred horse racing. APTN's Leanne Sanders has this report.
This land on the northwest outskirts of Saskatoon is quiet today, but thundering hooves and all the excitement of horse racing will soon have a home here. The proposed Moosomin Downs will host thoroughbred and standardbred racing, chariot and chuck wagons, and the Indian Relay, breaking ground at the end of the summer. Moosomin First Nation's Rob Woods says the racetrack is a stepping stone to other opportunities.
But our commitment is to basically move past a hobby-based business and allow for people that are going to participate and want to invest in horses and other things to know that, you know, our goal is to make this, turn it into a career for our young people.
In the meantime, Moosomin Downs is taking over the former Marquis Downs track in Saskatoon, running 10 days of racing starting on August 27th. The track was shut down the last 2 years due to COVID and then closed for good by its former operator. Chief Kenny Moccasin from the neighboring Soto First Nation says the closure of the track hit the horse racing community hard.
A lot of people, a lot of First Nation people had to take their horses to Winnipeg and also move their horses to Edmonton. But I'm sure they'll be happy to move their horses back here for the remaining of the racing season.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
It's time for one final break. Still ahead, a new school hopes to revitalize an Indigenous language in New Brunswick. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Sandy Whiteman sent in this gorgeous shot of the sun breaking through the clouds over Lenny Lake in the Northwest Territories. Lenny Lake is located west of Great Bear Lake in the north region of the NWT, and it looks absolutely stunning. Thanks, Sandy. You can email your photos to share@aptn.ca if you want to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. We start in the east, 26 in rain in Charlottetown and 28 in Fredericton. 14 in Happy Valley Goose Bay and 10 in rain in Cartwright. 25 in a mix of sun and cloud in Quebec City and 25 in sun in Val-d'Or. 28 degrees in mainly clear in Sarnia and 25 in North Bay. 22 in some rain in Thunder Bay and 15 in rain in Big Trout Lake. Cloudy and 8 degrees in Churchill and rain and 18 in Norway House. 19 and some rain in Barons River and showers in 23 in Winnipeg. Clear and 25 in Swift Current and 23 in North Battleford. 23 degrees in Meadow Lake and 21 in rain in Stony Rapids. Moving over to the west, 26 in a mix of sun and cloud and high level and 29 in Peace River. 25 in Edmonton and 24 in Calgary. Clear and 33 in Campbell River and 32 in Bella Coola. 21 in Prince Rupert and 25 in Dease Lake. 22 in a mix of sun and cloud in Beaver Creek and 18 in Old Crow. 32 in sun in Trout Lake and 28 in Norman Wells. Some rain and 21 in Inuvik and 25 in Colville Lake. 20 degrees in Baker Lake and 17 in Cambridge Bay. 9 degrees in Resolute and 10 degrees in Iqaluit. In Fredericton, New Brunswick, a new school is opening this fall with the goal of revitalizing an Indigenous language, and the woman behind it is getting some help from her Polaris Prize and Juno Award-winning son. Angel Moore reports.
Jeremy Dutcher is not only a well-known Maliseet musician from the Nagudguk Nation, he is an advocate for preserving the Wolastoq language. So he recently hosted a free concert at the Halifax Central Library. He was joined by friends to raise funds for the Gakimen Wolastoqey Language Immersion School, Dutcher donated $10,000, and a GoFundMe page has raised over $30,000.
I'm hoping that giving a big donation like that can also encourage other people who might have access to funds like that to give big as well.
Lisa Perley Dutcher is co-founder of the Immersion School and Jeremy's mother. The school is needed because according to the 2016 census, around only 350 people speak Wolastoqey.
We're doing this to raise awareness, but also to give people an opportunity to participate in language revitalization. In whatever way they can help us, that would be appreciated.
The school will focus on kindergarten to grade 4, with hopes to expand in the future. Dutcher says,
it's going to create institutions that are going to be around for, not just our kids, but our grandkids and the future generations. So I think it's a really exciting moment for linguistic revitalization in Wolastoq territory.
Fundraising concerts for the school are scheduled for Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, known as Halifax.
Across Canada, and especially in places like the Yukon, the number of fluent language speakers is declining. Now, a Yukon First Nations language department is using smartphone technology to teach its language to young speakers. Here's Sarah Connors with that story.
It's language learning with convenience. This newly released Athabasca Cards App has around 700 words and phrases, everything from animals to introductions. The app was developed by the Liard First Nation in Watson Lake, Yukon. It's a tool being used by the First Nations Language Department as the number of fluent Kaska speakers is dwindling. Kaska language worker Emerald Pope says an app is a great way to reach young people in the age of smartphones.
And then a lot of the youth who haven't exactly been exposed to the language, this way they can just pull the app out of their pocket, their phone out of their pocket and check out the app.
The app works like a set of flashcards. Users listen to elders speaking and can choose from around 40 decks of cards on topics like plants and morning routines. Paul Caesar Jules says the language department recently celebrated the app's release at the community's high school to rave reviews.
A lot of people were happy with it, and they were understanding, hey, I know this word. It really intrigued them that they downloaded and they were learning about the certain cards that were on the app.
You can find the Athabasca Cards app on the App Store or Google Play. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
All right, that's all the time we have for you today. For more on the Pope's visit, head over to our website at aptnnews.ca, and we will have much more from the papal tour in the coming days. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great night.